The claws were long enough to open a hull plate like a tin can, and the human named Oliver was scratching the creature under its chin. I froze at the control panel, my breathing tubes tightening. The creature we had captured 3 hours earlier was a Draxil hunter, a species so dangerous that our fleet manual listed it under the highest threat category possible. It had already broken through 2 containment fields. It had already injured one of my crew members, and now it was leaning into a human's hand like a pet. "Get away from it," I said, my voice shaking through the translator. "Oliver, step back immediately." He did not step back, he kept scratching. The Draxil hunter made a low sound, a sound none of our scanners had ever recorded before. A sound that almost resembled contentment. "He's fine," Oliver said. "Look at his ears. They're relaxed." If he wanted to hurt me, his ears would be flat against his skull. I did not know the ears could even move like that. I had studied this species for 6 years, and I did not know that. This was the moment I understood that humans were not simply a strange species among many. They were something else entirely, something my report would later fail to properly explain to my superiors, no matter how many drafts I wrote. My name is Vesa, and I was the lead xenobiologist aboard the research vessel Kestrel Horizon, assigned to observe first contact behavior between our alliance and the newly discovered human race. Every species in our records reacted to unknown predators the same way. Freeze, flee, fight. These were the only 3 responses that made sense to any of us. Humans had a 4th response, and it terrified me more than the other 3 combined. 2 days before the incident with the Draxil hunter, we had brought aboard a specimen from the ice world Sarin 4, a creature covered in short black spines that secreted a paralytic toxin on contact. Our handling team wore full protective suits just to move its containment box. The moment the box was opened for scanning, a woman named Priya walked past, saw the creature, and said, "Oh my goodness, look at this little guy," before anyone could stop her. She reached in with her bare hand. I shouted. My colleague Doran shouted louder. The toxin from those spines could stop a heart in under a minute according to our readings. Priya did not get paralyzed. She got a face full of curious sniffing from the creature, which apparently retracted its spines when it did not feel threatened, a detail our own scanners had somehow never detected in months of study. "He's just scared," she said, cradling the creature gently. "You people have been poking him with instruments this whole time. Of course his spines were up." Doran looked at me. I looked at Doran. Neither of us had an answer. By the end of the first week, I had started a private log titled "Anomalous Human Behavior," because I could not present these observations to the council without more evidence. No one would believe me otherwise. I barely believed myself. The humans called it petting. They did it constantly, without hesitation, and seemingly without any instinct for self-preservation whatsoever. It did not matter if the creature had claws, venom, sharp teeth, or a documented history of aggression. If it had fur, scales, or simply large eyes, a human would eventually try to touch it while making a soft voice and saying words like, "Who's a good boy?" or "Aren't you just the sweetest thing?" I began to suspect this was some kind of genetic defect, a species-wide blindness to danger. I even drafted a section of my report suggesting that human evolution had somehow removed their fear response towards smaller creatures, leaving them vulnerable to an obvious survival flaw. Then came the incident with the scarn beast, and I had to delete that entire section. The scarn beast was not small. It was enormous, easily 3 times the height of a human, with a mouth full of teeth in rows, and a temperament that had destroyed 2 scouting drones on sight. We had tracked it for weeks on the forest moon, before finally capturing it in a containment net, and it thrashed against the restraints with enough force to crack the reinforced flooring of our cargo bay. The captain ordered the area sealed. No one was permitted near the beast until sedation could be administered safely. A young man named Dennis, who worked in our supply division and had no combat or handling training whatsoever, wandered into the cargo bay because he heard what he described as a sad noise. By the time security reached him, Dennis was sitting cross-legged on the floor, 3 feet from the scarn beast's restrained head, talking to it in a low, calm voice. "You're not mad," Dennis said. "You're scared. That net probably hurts, doesn't it? I bet you just want to go home." The beast, which had nearly destroyed our containment systems an hour earlier, was lying still. Its enormous chest rose and fell slowly. When Dennis reached out and placed his palm flat against its snout, it did not snap forward. It did not thrash. It simply closed its eyes. I stood at the doorway with my recording device shaking in my hands, capturing every second of it, because I knew no one would believe this without visual proof. "How did you know it would not attack you?" I asked him afterward, once the beast had been safely sedated for transport. Dennis shrugged, the way humans do when they consider something obvious. "I didn't know for sure, but it wasn't attacking the net anymore. It was just breathing hard and shaking. That's not aggression. That's panic. Same as when my dog gets scared of thunderstorms back home. You don't yell at a scared animal. You talk soft and let it know you're not a threat." Dog. I had heard this word before in passing, but had never understood its significance until that moment. I requested information on this creature called a dog, and received over 400 results. Most of them, images of humans embracing large-toothed predators with expressions of pure joy. It became clear to me that humans had spent thousands of years living alongside creatures that could kill them, and instead of eliminating those creatures or fleeing from them, they had chosen a third option that our species had never considered. They had chosen to understand them. This was not recklessness. I had assumed for 2 weeks that it was recklessness, that humans simply lacked the intelligence to recognize danger. I was wrong, and admitting that in my report felt uncomfortable, because it meant rewriting everything I thought I knew about this species. Humans were reading body language on an instinctive level so refined that they could distinguish between genuine aggression and defensive fear within seconds, often from creatures they had never encountered before in their lives. My own scanning equipment, built by engineers far more advanced than any human technology, could not do what a single human glance could do in half the time. The final piece of evidence came during the diplomatic meeting itself, the one that would determine whether our alliance accepted humanity as a partner species or classified them as a contained threat, pending further study. The Council had summoned a creature called a Voran sentinel, an ancient guardian species used specifically for testing new alliance candidates. The Voran sentinel was massive, armored, and bred over generations to detect hostile intent in visitors. If it perceived a threat, it would attack without mercy. If it perceived peace, it would simply stand aside. No species in recorded history had ever gotten it to do anything beyond those 2 responses. Our human representative for the meeting was a woman named Alina, calm and quiet, chosen because of her diplomatic background rather than any specific training with dangerous wildlife. The Voran sentinel rose to its full height as she approached, easily 4 times her size, its armored plates shifting with a sound like grinding stone. The Council held its breath. I held whatever passed for my breath as well. Alina did not stop walking. She slowed her pace, lowered her shoulders, and softened her expression, the exact same posture I had now seen a dozen times across a dozen different encounters. She stopped a respectful distance away and simply waited, hands open at her sides. The Voran sentinel lowered its head. Then, to the disbelief of every single council member present, it made a sound that our historical records had never once documented in 10,000 years of observation. A low, rumbling sound, almost like a rusty version of the noise the Draxil hunter had made for Oliver. Alina smiled and stepped forward slowly, and rested her hand against the side of its massive jaw. "Hey there," she said softly. "You're just doing your job, aren't you? I'm not here to hurt anyone." The sentinel did not move away. It leaned, ever so slightly, into her palm. The council chamber fell into a silence I had never experienced in all my years of service. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. We simply watched as 10,000 years of established behavior, from an unshakable guardian species, was quietly rewritten by a woman with a soft voice and an open hand. I finished my report that night. I did not title it Anomalous Human Behavior anymore. I titled it Recommendation for Full Alliance Partnership, and in the final paragraph, I wrote something I never expected to write about any species we had encountered. Humans do not lack fear. They simply refuse to let fear decide who deserves kindness. Every creature they meet, however dangerous, however unfamiliar, is offered the same quiet patience before judgment is passed. This instinct, which I once believed was a flaw, may be the single greatest advantage our alliance could ever hope to gain. I recommended that every future first contact mission include at least one human representative. Not because they were the strongest species we had encountered, not because they were the most advanced, but because somewhere in the history of this small, fragile, remarkably fearless species, they had learned a lesson that the rest of the galaxy had somehow missed entirely. That understanding a creature was always more powerful than fearing it, and that sometimes, the most dangerous being in the room simply wanted someone to notice it was afraid. The council approved my recommendation unanimously. And somewhere on the lower deck, I later learned, Oliver was teaching the Draxil hunter to sit. It was, apparently, a very good boy.